Well, students, today I am going to discuss with you land degradation, causes, and control. First of all, you should understand that land is a resource. In what terms land is a resource? It is a source of supply or support, and it held a lot of reserves in it. Now, this land is one of the most vital resource as it is used for the production of crops and other biological materials needed for food, shelter, and the clothes. Now, if we just review records of this land, this land distribution pattern in India is in such a manner that agriculture is done almost on 44% of this land, or in other terms you can say 44% land is used for the purpose of agriculture. Similarly, these pastures and meadows, they occupy around 15% of this land. Then there are cultivable wastelands, they occupy around 12%. Then there are forests, they occupy roughly 10%. There are certain barren, we call them as the wastelands, they occupy around 8%. Urban land in India occupies around 5%, and there is some miscellaneous land and it occupies around 5.3%. Similarly, if we see the world scenario of this land use pattern distribution, agriculture scenario in the world that it occupies 11% of the land. Meadows and these pastures, they occupy around 22%. Similarly, forests, they occupy around 30%. And some, you can say some miscellaneous or the other lands, they occupy around 37%. Since the soil is part of the land, it forms the surface layer of the land, which covers more than 80% of the land. Now, the soil, you should be able to define the soil. It's a natural body which keeps on changing and allows the plants to grow. Now, the materials or constituents of the soil, it is made up of organic and inorganic materials. The inorganic compound in the soil is about 45%, and the organic component it is around 5%. The water component in the soil is around 25%, and the air component in the soil is about 25%. And this is some brief about this land and the soil. Now, before concentrating on the definition of this land degradation, today land is facing a number of challenges. Natural challenges are there as well as the anthropogenic challenges or impacts. Anthropogenic impacts are the impacts caused by the humans. We seldom find any piece of land that is not affected. If the land is fertile, still it is lacking in few essential nutrients, or for that matter, it may harbor or it may contain certain parasites which are harmful to the plants, or it may contain certain elements which, through the process of biological magnification, affects the plants and the animals. Now, this is the current scenario. At the same time, it is not possible to create a land which is free from any harmful substances. Now, you can well imagine what are the conditions of our land. We today are in a state where we are interested to regain the fertility of the soil or land, because we have to grow, we have to feed the human populations. Not only human population, we have to feed the animals. In the process, we lack in many aspects, and this ultimately leads to the degradation of the land. Now, coming to this land degradation definitions, I am saying that this land degradation is the process in which the value of the biophysical environment is affected by what? By a combination of human induced processes which are acting upon the land. I am saying the main driver for this land degradation is ultimately the humans. Because, for example, climate change is also one of the factor for land degradation, and we have kept it this climate change under natural conditions. But the driver for climate change is ultimately the humans. If we view these changes or these disturbances, they all are undesirable. Now, today, this land degradation is one of the most important environmental problem. And this land degradation, besides water pollution and air pollution and different kinds of pollution, it has become a challenge now for the scientific community in terms of it is sustainable development. And there are reports this challenge is now visible in many parts of the world, that they are estimating that this land ultimately which supports our vegetation, it supports animals, this is not going to last long. The problem is acute, and this environmental feature is vulnerable, and it might happen that we might lose this very precious resource. One term I have used, biophysical environment. Biophysical environment is basically a biotic and abiotic surrounding of an organism or populations. There are populations, there are organisms where in the land, in the soil, their surroundings in terms of biotic and abiotic factors. And these biotic and abiotic factors that have an influence on in what? In their survival, in their development, and in their evolution. And we have assigned a term biophysical environment. There are certain definitions, they are very simple, and you can just go through these definitions and you will understand what is the significance of this land and how this land is being productivity of the land is being degraded first temporarily, and later on that temporary change becomes a permanent change. As per the definition of United Nations CCG 2012, land degradation can be simply defined as deterioration of the physical, chemical, and biological or economic properties of soil and long-term loss of natural vegetation. And this land degradation will remain an important global issue for the 21st century. That is true. Today we are having seen that if we for the time being stop our high yielding varieties of crops, and for that matter you will see that without these high yielding varieties of crops, this we may not be able to produce much out of the soil which has been degraded to a larger extent. Basically, our food security is under threat today because of the land degradation, or we can say that soil degradation. Now, well, students, coming to now land degradation, you might be to some extent worried about that. On one hand, we are doing land degradation, and in this present slide, something like loss of soil, erosion, leaching. These are all these terms are there associated basically with the soil degradation. But before proceeding to discuss with you the degradation part of this land, let me again tell you the difference between land and the soil. When we talk of land, you know that land is the part of lithosphere of the earth. It is compressed, or it is comprised of solid rock material, and we assign a term that it is land. While as if I talk of soil, soil is the surface covering of the land. You know what is soil? Soil is formed thin cover over the land consisting of some minerals, organic materials, living organisms. It is also having land, and it is also having contains water, unlike the land. But land also contains minerals, but those minerals are locked. They cannot be used readily. When degradation of the rocks takes place, then these minerals are released. Through this process, these materials or minerals or inorganic compounds, they enter the soil and they are being used by the organisms. These organisms, they are absent in the land. So whatever discussion I will carry on, it will be around land degradation, but soil is also part of this land in terms that the soil forms the surface covering of land. Number two, we as the human beings are more worried or concerned about the soil rather than to the land. That is why my main focus would be soil, but it will have, I am defining it in terms of the land degradation. Uh, In this figure, if you will see, this land degradation is basically divided into two forms. That land degrades by the two processes. Number one is anthropogenic, that is degradation in the hands of the humans, and the natural. But in the previous slide, I told you that natural processes, except few, they are also the human induced. There are certain natural processes which ultimately degrade the land, but there are among the natural processes, for example, this climate change I have mentioned. This climate change is more an anthropogenic process rather than a natural process. Now, ultimately, what happens? This land, in terms of anthropogenic impacts, are the degradation, misuse of land, and mismanagement of the soil. On the other hand, when I talk of this natural land degradation or soil degradation, most of the degradation takes place through climate change and certain related factors. For example, instead of having rain over a period of time, the rainfall happens mostly for a very brief period of time. This is one aspect. Similarly, climate change has also brought receding of the glaciers or melting of the snow on the mountains, and they have triggered the process of land degradation or the soil degradation. This is all what happens basically to the land. Now coming to now this land, combination of both these two, anthropogenic as well as natural, it causes four degradation processes. Number one, physical degradation. Number two, it is chemical degradation. Number third, it is the biological degradation. And number fourth, it is the ecological degradation. These are the combined effects of anthropogenic as well as natural land degradation. This is the result. This is the outcome of, I call this is the outcome of the combined. When I combine anthropogenic and natural processes, this leads to these changes. Now, first coming to this physical degradation, now here you will see that crusting and sealing. It happens to the, in terms of the physical change to the soil, it causes crusting. You know what is crusting? Crusting is basically a sort of compact thin layer of, this happens over the soil. There is formation of compact thin layer of soil. And there are agents, for example, rain can be one of the agents for causing this crusting. And this crusting causes clogging of pores. And when clogging of pores happens, it makes soil impermeable to the water. Once the soil becomes impermeable to the water, it does not allow water or air, does not contain pore, and with the result, this is the first physical degradation of the land or for that matter soil. And this crusting and sealing, it leads to the compactness of the soil. That means soil is not able to withhold any crop now. Now physical degradation, there is a runoff and there is erosion by water or there is by wind, which we have discussed already in the first lecture, measures for controlling soil erosion. Similarly, we call the soil as or land as it is endangered, or we can say that a particular patch of land, a particular area having good soil, it has extincted. Now, no more we will be able to do cropping or afforestation in this particular area. We see unoptimal soil temperatures, inhibited aerations. These are all ultimately it leads to the desertification, which we will be discussing as a separate subtopic as desertification, various control strategies. It is 3.3. Uh, Basically, this desertification has initiated from the impacts of humans or the natural processes. It comes under the heading physical degradation. Similarly, you see chemical degradation, acidification occurs, salinization, already discussed. But one point here, decline in CC. You might not be knowing what is CC. CC basically soil cation exchange capacity. CC is there is decline. CC is soil, the capacity of the cation exchange capacity. CC. C stands for cation, E stands for exchange, and again C stands for the capacity. CC soil, how much capacity is in the soil to exchange these cations. For that matter, if there is decline in the CC or the CC number is low, therefore it means that not many molecules are able to bind, or we can say that they are not able to react to the particle surface. Okay. Similarly, if the CAC number is high, for example, we will increase the CAC number, this cation exchange capacity. A large number of molecules can bind to the particle surface. Now, you might be thinking now, what is a good CEC? Because ultimately, our point is, what is a good EC? What number we should have, so that we can see that we are having a very good CEC, that is cation exchange capacity of the soil. A high cation exchange capacity more than 25 is a good indicator. What it indicates now? That soil has high clay and organic matter content. Once it has high clay and organic matter content, it can hold a lot of cations. It can hold a lot of cations. Now, in contrary, if I say the soil is having, it is with low CEC, that is cation exchange capacity less than 5. It is an indication that the soil is sandy with little or no organic matter, and it cannot hold many cations. It cannot hold many cations. I think I will repeat it here. High cation exchange capacity, what it indicates? It is an indication that the soil is having high clay and organic matter content. Similarly, if the CC or cation exchange capacity is low, less than 5, it is an indication that the soil is sandy with little or no organic matter that cannot hold many cations. How to find the CC? There is a process, there is a procedure that is beyond the scope over here. If we are to calculate, for example, meal equivalents of hydrogen, potassium, magnesium, calcium, we have a proper calculation method. We can calculate it, that CC of that particular soil. That can be done when we do practical part of this soil or land in our lab. Similarly, there are some elemental these imbalances. There is leaching, there is pollution, contamination. These are some of the chemical degradation processes which takes place. Now, coming to now biological degradation, that is loss of soil biodiversity. Now, this CC, for example, it will lead to loss of biodiversity. Now, soil-borne pathogens, new pathogens may come, which may ultimately degrade the quality of the crops over there. Decline in the soil organic matter is another issue, which is a point of concern. Emission of greenhouse gases, loss of soil carbon sink capacity. These are some of the biological degradation methods which lead to land degradation or the soil degradation. Now you see, besides physical, chemical, and biological degradation of soil, this uh, ultimately what happens? It leads to ecological degradation. Now nutrient cycling or biogeochemical cycling, it will get disrupted. Hydrological cycle will get disrupted. There will be change in the net primary productivity or biome productivity. Loss of nutrients is another issue as far as the ecology of the particular soil or land is concerned. There is inhibited denaturing of pollutants. Efficiency of inputs will be get decreased. There will be decline. Now, overall, if we see what will happen, it will lead to the decline in the ecosystem services, or it may also lead to the reduction in nature conservancy. But this is all about this land degradation. I will stop here. Please inbox all the questions in the WhatsApp. Anybody having any difficulty regarding, because I have split again, next part of the same lecture will be discussed with more elaboration in the next part tomorrow, inshallah. For today, I will end here, but go through these contents, apply your mind, apply your mind, and find out what are the methods of this land degradation. And you can call me, you can post questions in the WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you.